What is the atmosphere like now between the Stay and the Leave groups, the two opposing groups in this race? Professor Wang.
Well, so-called the poll, I think, changing recently quite gradually. In the former time, 7 months ago, there's no possibility to pass this referendum. But now it's quite a risk, so people are very worried about that. But I trust maybe the swing vote is the most important. The last moment, the silent majority maybe make the decision, not these guys, to show their importance, because the referenda from the beginning until now is just a playing game. They want to bargain for the UK with the European Union, get some special statuses, and then political leaders also bargain each other for domestic politics, and the people also bargain from the government.
Right. And Mr. Bastin, let me ask you this. It looks like a neck-to-neck race, very tight, but the Leave camp seems to be gaining ground now. What is the atmosphere like there?
Well, we'll come back to the polls. The atmosphere is increasingly quite hostile, even ferocious. So quite a competitive fight coming here, where there's increasing sort of almost internecine warfare in the British Conservative Party, and speakers are very, very aggressive. In terms of the polls, the issue is whether or not they are accurate. Are people really talking about what they're actually going to do? I think if you remember quite recently at the general election in the UK, the polls proved to be hopelessly inaccurate. If they're to believe, then it does look like the Leave campaign are stealing some sort of march. It's far more emotional, their campaign. Their supporters are far more passionate, and they're led by very charismatic individuals such as Boris Johnson, the former Mayor of London, and Nigel Farage, the UK Independence Party, where they're really using their trump card, their only card, which is immigration. And I think that's what could really influence people.
Okay, so Mr. Bastin mentioned immigration. What do you think, Mr. Evan, are the issues that are dominating this debate?
Well, it was just mentioned very clearly. Immigration is a very sensitive topic, and it seems to have gotten ground in the debate. In a lot of cases, actually, that's not necessarily linked with the EU, because we have two different things: the freedom of movement of labor in the EU and external, let's say, immigration from non-EU countries. But all these issues are being put together by the Leave campaign, and we saw actually just today the fact that UKIP is using posters with photos from the migrant crisis to depict the EU. That's clearly not a crisis that was determined provoked by the European Union.
And this last full week will be really critical to let the undecided voters make up their mind. And on Thursday, leaders from 10 major UK cities except London signed a letter saying that a vote to leave would put cities in serious economic danger. And now we have more details about this letter. In it, it says that across our 10 cities and their surrounding regions, EU membership has created 63,000 jobs and protected another 16,800. It has provided £1.8 billion of investment to help grow our urban economies, including vital infrastructure from tram lines to trunk roads. And together, our urban areas already deliver more than half of the UK's economy. So, gentlemen, could this information, this latest information in this letter, change the minds of undecided voters, Professor Wang?
Well, I think that for the elites, particularly for the business elites, the support remain in the European Union. They benefit from the European big market. But for the ordinary people, they're more emotionally influenced by the migration issues, challenges, because of the so many difficulties, problems in the European Union, the migration crisis. So we think about that there's a referenda. So it's an ordinary people take the decision. It's not the elites. So how can the elites convince ordinary people that the Leave European Union is the cost which they cannot afford? This, I think, still not clearly.
Mr. Bastin, do you agree with Professor Wang? He said that it's not only a race between the Leave and the Stay, but also divisions between the elite and the ordinary?
I think so, most definitely, and those figures, obviously I'm going to declare my hand here, certainly should sway everybody. I mean, they're quite believable. It's very difficult to believe that coming out of the EU is going to do anything but a devastating effect to the national economy and the regional economy. The ordinary people of the UK may not believe those figures, may not be influenced by those figures, because at the moment the UK economic recovery is still very, very sluggish. Incomes are not rising in line with the cost of living. GDP is still not really back to what it perhaps was a few years ago. So the average UK citizen is not really feeling any sort of EU membership feel-good factor. And that, I suspect, I do worry, could lead to a lot of people finding these figures a little bit fanciful and ignoring them, and going with the Leave campaigns, again, trump card of the fear of immigration, immigrants taking jobs, immigrants causing crime. This very, very visual poster campaign has really, I think, struck a chord, and that's why the Leave campaign, quite worryingly, have taken some sort of lead. So, yeah, the UK economy is not in good shape.
All right, let's turn to Mr. Even here. Do you agree that these figures could help change the minds of those undecided voters?
Well, they're not the first figures to appear in the debates. I mean, the Remain camp has been providing figures and proofs of the benefits that the UK has by being a member of the EU for months now. Unfortunately, a lot of the debate seems to be based on on emotions and not so much on facts or on correct facts. So yes, it plays into the debate, but I don't expect it to have a major influence. It's a bit late for that.
Mm-hmm. And some analysts agree
But
with you, Mr. Even. They say that they argue that the impact on the UK's economy has somewhat been exaggerated. For example, the former Conservative leader Lord Howard has said the Treasury forecasts of losses of £4,300 per household if there is a vote to leave the EU are widely discredited. And he said everything else is guesswork, and it is a great shame when it comes to when it is presented as fact, when it is nothing of the kind. So, gentlemen, let me ask you this. Do you think this is purely guesswork, Professor?
Well, I think the people's quite emotional in this sensitive time and this uncertainty period. So these figures maybe impact some of them, but more people, just from the living standards, that the concerns of jobs, the vote for even for single reason, it's for very easy, not just from our rational choice to make the decision. So this is the reason why so many countries are worried about the result of the referendum.
Mm-hmm. Well, all these figures, to some extent, they say a lot about the benefit the UK has had from the EU. But on the other hand, no one knows for sure what's going to happen to UK's economy and to the region's economy, whether UK chooses to leave or stay in the EU. So let's talk about the consequences of this referendum, gentlemen. If the EU referendum keeps the UK within the EU, will Prime Minister David Cameron be able to meet his promises of, having this increased UK influence in the regional bloc? Will he fight for a bigger say? Mr. Bastin?
I think he will. I think it depends very much on if there is victory, on the margin of victory. The Leave campaign will probably claim some sort of moral victory, even if they come close but still lose. So if, for example, the vote is split, let's say low 50s Remain, late 40s Leave, then the British Prime Minister's authority perhaps will be severely damaged. So I don't think he will go back to Brussels with a strong hand. What still worries me is that even the Conservative Party, who are in the Remain camp, are not really negotiating very, very tactfully and are not really trying to work I think, and engage with our European partners as well as they could do. So I think we need a shift in government for there to be real progress. So I don't think that he will have much of a stronger hand, and that's assuming they do win. And if they do win, it will be too narrow, I suspect. So there will be further disagreement, and really Britain will be out in the cold effectively, even if they're still members.
Right, and Mr. Ivan, how will the EU respond to Cameron's request if the UK decides to stay with the EU? Will the EU refuse to make further concessions to the UK before the referendum?
Well, the main concessions have already been negotiated before the referendum, and obviously we'll have to see an implementation of that agreement. I mean, it will be obviously a big relief for the other European leaders, given the various crises that the EU has to deal with. I think there will be they will be open to implement clearly the agreements made, and they will try. I'm quite confident to reinforce really the links that keep the UK in the EU.
Mm-hmm. In another case scenario, gentlemen, if the referendum sees the UK becoming the first member to leave the European Union, how could it affect the relations between the UK and the EU, Professor?
Well, definitely UK need to renegotiate the relations with European Union. Of course, they cannot totally leave Europe, because the economic people exchange still linkage is very strong. Like Norway is not a member of the European Union, but still a member of the Schengen area, and also is like with FTA, with it's very close relations. But of the financial center of London and others, this is also very risks, because the position of the UK is uncertainty. This bargain renegotiation process maybe takes time, and the cost will be quite high. So it's in the short term definitely not good for UK's economy.
Mm-hmm. Will it have some impact on UK's international influence, Mr. Bastin, if the UK chooses to leave the EU?
Most definitely, it certainly will be seen as a real backward step by our international partners. Our punching out above our weight, which we've done for so many years, will be more and more difficult. London has just been said as a financial centre, perhaps one of the financial centres in the world, will suffer. We have to remember that 44% of UK exports go to the European Union. It's hard to believe that coming out will not have a detrimental effect, an immediately detrimental effect on that trade, and also on attracting investment from international economies such as China that are growing, becoming more powerful, where a lot of that investment really is about using the UK quite strategically as a gateway to expansion across the European Union, and I suspect that will be hit very, very negatively. So I'm afraid I really do have serious concerns about this, and the Leave campaign really are really playing really a really dangerous game with the UK economy, and playing on British consumers' emotional feelings. I just hope when they get into that polling booth, in the privacy of that polling booth, they'll vote with their head and think about jobs, investment and the economy, and not with their heart.
Well, what could a Brexit decision mean to the European Union? What does it mean to lose the UK, Mr. Ivan?
Well, it most certainly would have negative influence for the EU as well. I mean, would be a very negative signal in which the Union hasn't managed to maintain one of its main members. Its international prestige, its power of attraction would be somewhat diminished. The UK is obviously one of the biggest members, the second biggest economy in the Union. So also the EU budget will be affected, and there are a number of let's say negative consequences, both for EU's power, influence in the world. It might also affect the way economies are being regulated, and how much they will be regulated. It will largely be a negative consequence. Thus, also from here, the wish of all the 27 member states, the other ones, and of the European institutions for the UK to remain a member of the Union.